Kayo dyan, narinig niyo ako sa YouTube? 1, 2, 3, sound check. Alright, let's get back to action, guys. Hopefully this time magandang audio natin. Good evening, good morning everyone. I hope na-appreciate nyo, na naintindihan nyo yung pinagsasabi natin dito. Anyway, gusto kong balikan, guys, yung topic na we're able to touch on kanina, at saka may mga couple of posts tayo kanina about this issue. Dahil sa aking palagay, mahalaga ito. I was able to get some access that is one of the upcoming major surveys, which actually is quite encouraging. But at the same time, there are also a couple of surveys and numbers I'm looking at kasi interface yan ng different survey agencies, which also tell you na talagang there's no room for complacency, no? Pag-usapan natin yan. Now, obviously, I'll go through that. I cannot show exactly, hindi ko pa masabi exactly, okay, confidential pa kasi ito, kaya hindi ko masabi exactly saan kung nakakaya. Pero ito yung basically number 1 si Bongo, number 2 Erwin, number 3 Ben, number 4 Tito Soto, number 5 Bong Revilla, number 6 Lapid, number 7 Lacson, number 8 Cayetano, number 9 De La Rosa, Binay, and then basically tied na the rest. Camille Villar, Pacquiao, Willie Ravillame, Abalos, Bam, Pangilinan, Tolentino, and Imee Marcos. So sila po ay sila lahat ay competitive within the range of Magic 12. Pag-usapan natin yan shortly, and then I'll tell you guys how close this thing is. The big story here is that Bongo is consolidating his position as the most competitive and most compelling candidate from the DDS side. But the other story is that ang lakas din na akyat ng numbers. Jimmy Bondoc from around just 4% nung January, ngayon po ay umakyat na sa almost double digit, almost. Philip Salvador, feeling ko kasalanan ko to eh. Ba't kasi ginawa natin yung budots kay gumaganon. Tuloy tumaas si Philip Salvador, pati si Mark Oleta, yan, Jimmy Bondoc, niyamat kay kasalanan natin, pinasigat natin yung moves na eh. Hindi sila pasok within the range, but nevertheless, medyo significant yung increase nila. Basically, dito sa nakikita natin, almost exactly 5 points increase. 4 to 9, 11 to 16, 18 to 24. Lahat ng mga pro digong, more or less 4 to 5 points bump ang nakita nila, with one interesting exception, Imee Marcos. Si Imee Marcos yata mo ang biggest loser so far dito, because medyo alanganin si Imee Marcos dito. So let's see where this thing is gonna go, but pag-usapan natin yan, guys, okay? Pag-usapan natin yan. Her numbers dropped by 6 points between January and February, okay? Ayan na naman tayo. So biggest loser si Imee. Nevertheless, lahat ng DDS umakyat. But nevertheless, competitive rin si Bam and Kiko Pangilinan. Both of them clearly within the range of Magic 12. In fact, very few points divide them, guys, from the rest of the group. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Oh my goodness. Basically, labanan nito ng mga ilang libo lang. Few 100,000 votes. A few barangay, basically, could determine sino mag-Magic 12. Ganon ka-tight yung race for the last 2 slots. But basically, the top 5 is steady here. There are gonna be 3 or 4 different survey agencies coming out. There's also one Lilo survey na hindi ata sila nag-release ng public version, but you know, sila yung pinaka-comprehensive. And yung mga ibang kausap natin, nag-interface sila dito. But anyway, bukas naman maging official lahat ito. But before going deeper into this, guys, let me talk about the case of Ma'am Heidi Mendoza, because nakita ko na naman, ayan na naman tayo sa mga kaibigan natin dyan. Guys, first of all, I don't buy this whole argument na parang let's drop our standards dahil wala naman perfecto. I don't buy that argument, because imperfect si Robin Hood Padilla. Imperfect din si, I don't know, imperfect din si Riza Ontiveros. But they're not the same level of imperfection, right? Lahat tayo tao, right? But the fact of the matter is that this is not the question of who's perfect and who's imperfect. Ang question dito, guys, is competence. Ang question dito is sincerity. Ang question po guys dito is very, very simple. The question here is, overall, is a certain candidate tugma doon sa inisip natin na maganda para sa ating bayan? Right? Ganon kasimple lang yan. Ganon kasimple lang yan, guys. Alright? It's as simple as that. Okay? So, going back to this, I think we have to get rid of this tendency na kung saan basta may isa lang masabing maganda yung isang kandidato, talon tayo kaagad para sa kanya. And then, i-price in na lang natin lahat ng mga kaewanan. Right? And kitang-kita natin, for instance, in the case of, natin, kay Donald Trump, di ba? Si Donald Trump, anti-system, blah, 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 okay lang na ganito, okay lang na ganyan, okay lang ganyan. Okay, next thing you know, ano nangyari ngayon? Diyos ko, buong mundo ay nagkakagulo na. Tapos itong tao, yung pag-iisip niya, tatay na pang 1980s. Tapos yung mga supporters na, yung mga kamaga natin, pinipilit nila, trust me bro, everything will be fine. Ngayon na naman tayo. After trillions of dollars wiped out, 401k of people getting smashed, and my goodness, world trade is, there could be loss of $700 billion in global output just because of all this crazy stuff. Hindi. Kasi si Trump, ganun, okay na sa akin. You see, we have to get rid of that. Or dahil si Digong ay, pro-divorce, progressive na yan, pwede na yan sa akin. Or dahil lang si Digong ay pro-federalism, okay lang sa akin. Usually, guys, that's how voters make big mistakes. Voters make big mistakes when they fall for a candidate. I think that's halo effect, whatever. When that candidate at least strikes the right note on at least one issue. And then basically, you're gonna turn a blind eye to everything else. Mali po yan. Because when you look at a certain candidate, you have to look at the entirety of the person's character, the content of character, but also the content of their policy and advocacy and their background, and also, of course, their leadership material, right? So, yan ang talagang malaking problema natin, guys, because people tend to go, parang single issue lang, nagdi-decision na sila sinusuportahan nila, hindi. Instead of looking at the full ledger, and then making decision. Diba? So parang, diba, guys, it really is weird to me because when, people want to make big decisions like, I don't know, jowa or bili ng kotse. I'm not saying the two are the same, but you look at many factors, right? Maganda ba yung ugali? O may pera ba? Or minsan may trabaho ba? Matino ba? Mabait ba? Kung kotse naman, practical ba? Maganda ba tignan? Maintenance niya, kamusta? Diba? You don't go for one car, for instance, or you don't go for a jowa based on just one attribute, right? Or, diba, you look at the full range of factors. Dapat ganyan din, guys. Pagdating sa elections, when you're looking at the candidates, you have to look at the full range of attributes, policies, background, and everything that they bring to the table. Now, it also works the other way. So sabihin natin, ikaw ay gustong-gusto mo na isang candidate, and then biglang yung isang candidate na yun may sasabihin na sablay. Or seemingly sablay yung sinabi niya, and then biglang i-cancel culture mo. So, in short, cancel culture and single issue based hollow effect voting, both of them are both sides of the same coin. And that's a problematic coin to me. I think dyan tayo nagkakamali. Because the first version is false positive, the second version is false negative error. Both are both are errors. Type 1 error and type 2 error. False positive and false negative. Yung isa, akala mo okay yung candidate dahil may isa siyang sinabi na gusto mo, tapos i-ignore mo everything else. That's false positive. And then false negative is, okay yung candidate, lahat okay, maayos. Biglang may sinabi na hindi mo gusto, or may isang policy na hindi gusto, or may, I don't know, nakipicture sa ganito na hindi gusto, or may lumabas about the past na hindi mo gusto, biglang, i-cancel na natin. Yan ang pangit, guys. That's immature because in any major mature decision you make in life, you take into consideration a whole range of different factors. And parang basically like accounting yan, diba? When you put all of those factors together, then you make a judgment whether this person meets your basic quantum or threshold of acceptability, or if talagang magaling, then go for it. Mag-volunteer pa kayo o actively contribute that person. So remember, the first level is kung nakapasa sa standard nyo, i-boto nyo siya. Pag lampas sa standard nyo, meaning at taas ng ang galing ng kandidato niyan, ang gagawin mo is you actively contribute. You volunteer. Your campaign financing, di ba? And if ikaw may plataforma, etc., you amplify their message, you help them, you try to get them in power. And then the next level is you join the campaign. Right? So yun ang sinasabi ko, guys. Ang problema sa atin is this political immaturity whereby we commit either of the two errors. And this is not unique to any camp, right? So usually yung mga right-wing populist voters, unfortunately, they fall for the first type of error, which is false positive. Wala akong pake, itong tao na to ay convicted, indicted, itong tao na to ay mamamatay tao, itong tao na to ay napaka-questionable yung background. Wala akong pake sa lahat na yan dahil may isa siyang adhikay na gusto ko. So all in na ako sa kanya. Yan, problema yan, false positive yan. And that's how we get into trouble. That's how we got Duterte into power in 2016. Because si Duterte, one day he'll talk about divorce, one day he'll talk about federalism, one day he'll talk about Mindanao, one day he'll talk about drugs, and then each constituency, because they're just for one issue, they go for it, right? And then they'll ignore everything else. When in fact, a president doesn't do only one thing. The president does a whole range of things, right? So that's false positive. Right? False positive. Masyado ka na-believe sa isang candidate dahil lang may isa siyang sinabi na maganda. Pero the other side of this, and this tends to be very common among, unfortunately, yung mga pa-woke natin na kasama, is yung cancel culture naman. And I think all of us are, to be honest, I think none of us are impervious to that. Lahat tayo may tendency, pag nakita natin si ganito, ay, ano na to, ganun, ayoko na, di ba? Lahat tayo, unfortunately, we have the tendency na type 2 error naman tayo. Like believe tayo sa isang tao or tingin natin matinong tao na to, and then biglang you see that person in a picture with the wrong person or saying the wrong thing in the wrong context or going against a certain cause, and then i-cancel mo yung tao na yan. Mali din yan. Cancel culture is wrong. Also, pabudol dahil lang may isang single issue, halo effect, all in na ako, pricing ko na yan, mali din yan. So both of that is wrong. Of course, even worse is, ito po ay kababayan natin, or ito ay galing sa probinsya namin, or ito ay dahil ganyan-ganyan. Yung tribalism, that's even worse. And that clearly goes across the political spectrum, right? And is always a sign of a backward political culture. But as I said, backward political cultures are not only about tribalism, they're also about these two types of errors. And as I said, again, tendency lang yan. I notice more among right-wing populist voters, they go for false positive, they're willing to accept everything about a candidate because that candidate stands for one thing that they truly believe in, right? Or they just hate the other side more, right? And then, ang problema naman sa kabila is cancel culture. May konti lang silang marinig na hindi nila gusto, or may nakita sila na nakipicture ka na, ay cancel na yan, ayoko na yan. Yun, both of those are wrong, guys. Both of those are wrong. But again, this is not a clear-cut left versus right, because to be honest, nakita natin that actually ang pinakamagaling mag-gaslight, pinakamagaling mag-cancel culture ay actually mga right-wingers. Like, tignan mo yung mga DDS. Ang galing nila mag-cancel culture, di ba? Iti-twist nila yung words na, kunya si Richard may sinabi sa Human Development Index, iti-twist nila para ipamukha na elitista si Richard, ganun, para ma-cancel siya ng lahat ng mga ganito. Yan, gawain din nila yan. So, cancel culture is not a monopoly of the left. Clearly, ginagamit ng mga DDS din yan, among others, right? Or Kamala is a communist. Seriously. You have to be really ignorant to think that Kamala is a communist. Kamala is as new liberal as it can get, right? But you use that kind of parang communist tagging, ganyan, woke tagging to... So in cancel culture is actually not a left thing lang. But I noticed that unfortunately, even yung mga friends natin from progressive side, even from Team Liwanag side, medyo minsan excited masyado mag-cancel culture, right? Now, having said that, I'm not saying na dapat wala tayong standards. I'm not saying na dapat wala tayong red lines, right? But nevertheless, I think, first of all, we have to realize that there'll never be a candidate who will perfectly meet everything we want from that person. In fact, if there's a candidate that perfectly meets everything we want from that person, magdadalawang isip ka. Totoo ba to? Di ba? Ano ba? Baka Cambridge Analytica to, di ba? So that's one thing you have to keep in mind. Now, why am I saying this? I'm saying this in the context clearly of the reaction, or I would say misreaction, or some would say overreaction, or some would say understandable reaction kay Ma'am Heidi Mendoza. Just to be clear, I think some of folks, especially from the Team Liwanag group and from marginalized minority communities, ay basically nag-withdraw sila ng support kay Ma'am Heidi Mendoza because she did not stand for same-sex marriage last time I checked. And she expressed a couple of, let's just say, more conservative points of view, right? Okay. So, si Sasa Girl, right, ay nag-withdraw ng support. Okay, okay. Let me first of all remind people that last time I checked, even Lenny Robredo was not fully progressive on all issues. Like for instance, remember when she was asked about abortion and divorce and a couple of other issues, she was actually quite conservative, or at least center on those issues. Remember the interviews with Tito Boy Abunda? You can check that. But did that stop people from voting for her? Did that stop good people from voting for her? Did that stop kakampings from? No. Because they looked at Lenny and they said, maybe on this issue, Lenny is a bit more to the right than me, or maybe Lenny is a bit more center than me, but Lenny, malinis siya, maayos siya, competent siya, she stands for good governance, so I'll vote for Lenny. So, like, first of all, I want to remind people na this is not the first time that we have actually a Team Liwanag or progressive candidate who may have quite a conservative stance, or let's just say not yet a modern or contemporary stance on some of these issues, right? Like let's say for instance same-sex marriage, which last time I checked is also not legal in the country, or at least not legal yet, right? But look at this. Si Ma'am Mendoza, nag-apologize pa rin siya. And look at how she responded, in fact, to criticism to her. Instead of doubling down and attacking people for trying to cancel culture and all of that, in fairness naman sa kanya, nagtaos puso pa siya na nag-reach out. So ito, nag-thank you pa siya, si Senator aspirant na Heidi Mendoza, for instance, kay content creator na si Sasa Girl, sa kabila ng pag-atras nito ng pagsuporta sa kanyang kandidatura. Ito ang pinost ni Heidi Mendoza, Commissioner Mendoza, who we also had on the shows, sa kanyang Facebook post ngayon, Miyerkules, April 9, nagpasalamat siya at humingi ng tawad sa lahat ng mga taong kanyang nasaktan. Diba? Ang ganda, diba? Humility. She could have easily said, okay, fine, whatever, diba? Parang, she could have said, ilan na nga lang kami matinong kandidato, mag-withdraw ka pa, which is something I'm gonna talk about shortly. Ito, of course, kung maalala natin, nauna nang nagpahayag si Sasa Girl ng kanyang pag-atras sa suporta kay Heidi Mendoza matapos itong malaman na hindi sang-ayon ng itong senatorial aspirant na, of course, in-interview din natin sa issue ng same-sex union, for instance, or marriage, for instance, right? Pero ito yung response ni Ma'am Mendoza, Commissioner Mendoza. Sabi niya, maraming salamat pa rin, ikaw ang nagbukas ng ating salobin at nagmulat ng ating mata sa aking pagkukulang. Di ba? Imagine mo, parang instead of her attacking these people back or saying parang how dare you cancel me, ganun, parang sabi niya, wait lang, at least napaisip pa ako. Now, unless I hear from her exactly what is her final stance on this issue, I'm not gonna speculate, but at least I think we have to give credit to her for saying that na-appreciate niya na saan galing itong mga tao na nagagalit sa kanya instead of papagalitan niya yung mga nagalit sa kanya. So for me, that's not only humility. I think that's a show of leadership, and that's also showing openness to dialogue. Sabi niya, sa sariling karanasan ko, huminga ako ng paumanhin sa mga nasaktan at na-disappoint, pero hindi ibig sabihin na hindi ko kinikilala ang inyong karapatan at hindi ko pinapakinggan ang inyong mga hinaing. So in short, we may not be exactly on the same, it's not even on the same page na. Parang we may not be on the same line in the same page, but bukas ako to hear your side and to have a dialogue. Again, I think this is a very good thing. This shows again, this is a true progressive, because a progressive is not someone who's just like 100% woke on every issue, right? Is also that openness to dialogue, especially across generations, right? Across generation. Patuloy ko pa rin babantayan ang budget na sapat at budget na walang kupit para sa lahat. Sisimulan ko sa paghahanap ng budget sa pangailangan nyo, budget sa pagkakapantay-pantay ng karapatan at kasarian, hindi man tayo magkaparehas ng pamamaraan. So again, this is a very good intervention by her. Her point is, we may not have exact understanding of how we should move forward with certain advocacies, pero parehas tayo ng end goal. Parehas tayo ng adhikain, parehas tayo ng vision para sa ating bansa. Hindi ko na sabihin yung mga ibang part na yan. Sisikapin ko yon kahit hindi ako mapunta sa Senado. Ito pa yung kagandahan ng sinabi niya, na parang even if yung iba hindi boboto sa akin, even if hindi ako manalo, tuloy pa rin ang itong adhikain ko para sa good governance, para sa accountability and transparency sa issue ng budget na sapat at budget na walang kupit para sa lahat. Patuloy ko pa rin babantayan yung budget at yung kaban ng bayan. Yan guys, in fairness, yan, impressive. This is what I'm talking about, right? So, in a way, parang hindi siya nag-immediately parang nag-cave in. Kasi ako, I also don't like yung mga tipong candidate na kung may sasabihin, tapos nag-backlash, biglang palitan nila yung sasabihin nila. I think the right thing always is to say, okay, naintindihan ko saan kayo galing, bukas ako na magkaroon ng dialogo, and at the end of the day, we want the best for our country, and at the end of the day, andito ako for all of these other positive things, right? That's the way. Kasi kung biglang may backlash, tapos biglang palit yung sinasabi, ay ibig sabihin balimbing yan. So, ang ganda nung ginawa ni Ma'am Heidi Mendoza because it's a combination of genuine apology, which is more of really understanding and compassion. At the same time, still saying that, she has her own stance on things, and still saying that she's not only this issue, she's all of these other issues na mahalaga rin para sa ating bansa, including yung issue ng anti-corruption, good governance, and transparency. Right? And at the end of the day, yun naman talaga yung kanyang primary na adhikain, which is fighting corruption. Right? So, yun yung sinasabi ko dito. Kaya, as I said, katulad ni Ma'am Heidi Mendoza, naintindihan ko rin saan galing yung disappointment ng ating mga kaibigan. But as I said, let's not also forget, back in the day, even someone like Leni Robredo had quite, I would say, more conservative position on certain issues. And yet, di ba, binoto pa rin siya ng mga kababayan natin na naniwala sa liwanag, naniwala sa good governance because they look at the full picture. They look at everything that Leni Robredo was bringing to the table. So para sa akin, dapat ganun din. Hindi pwede yung isang issue lang na hindi kayo sang-ayon, isang issue lang na, in fact, sometimes, remember, there are also levels to this. Same-sex marriage, same-sex union. There's so many levels to this, right? We can have a long discussion about that. It doesn't mean that just because you're not exactly at the same level or the same wavelength on a certain issue, it doesn't mean na magkalaban na kayo, right? Or dapat canceling ka na. So, yun ang sinasabi ko, guys. So, I'm very glad to see this very sincere but at the same time, hindi balimbing and at the same time, very sensible na response from senatorial candidate Heidi Mendoza. And that's why proud na proud tayo na we got a chance earlier this year to have an interview with her at talagang layout. So, I really encourage you guys to check my interview with her because we really discussed talagang hindi lang yung kanyang pinanggalingan, yung kanyang humble beginnings, the risk she took in her throughout the decades, and actually of course yung kanyang tungkulin at saka serbisyo sa bayan bilang isang commissioner ng Commission on Audit, and not to mention of course yung kanyang assessment ng good governance record ni Vice President Leni Robredo, among other things, right? So yun ang sinasabi ko, guys. Sana guys, we get rid of this culture na just because of one disagreement or one misunderstanding, ayan na, galit na tayo. Masyado tayong emotional, masyado tayong madaling matrigger, masyado tayong trigger happy. Wag ganon. It never helps. What we need is dialogue. And sometimes dialogue leads to even more disagreement. It's okay, at least dapat bukas tayo sa dialogue. Ang pangit po yung style na, ay wala na yan, cancelled na yan, ayoko na, ganun na. Now, the good thing is for Ma'am Heidi Mendoza, she's increasingly a mainstream figure. And in my opinion, whether she wins or not, I think she's already a mainstream figure. She's already going to be a major figure. And she's going to be a major figure for years and God willing decades to come in a good sense, in the good sense of the word. Meaning, as a champion of good governance, right? In the meantime, meron tayong mga ibang kandidato na galing sa genuine opposition na may malaking chance talaga na makasama sa susunod na Senado, at kasama dyan si Bam Aquino, of course, and si Kiko Pangilinan. At least dito sa isang survey na nakita natin, Ito talaga yung labanan na yang this is gonna be really a fight among, to a certain degree, Camille, Manny Pacquiao, Willie Revillame, Benor Abalos, Bam Aquino, Kiko Pangilinan, Tolentino, and Imee Marcos. See, Imee Marcos, as I said, there was a huge drop, 6 point drop over the actually more. Sorry, more than 6 point drop. So as high as 44% or more siya in some of the surveys back in the day in January. Ngayon po ay under 30% na lang siya. Under 30% na siya. Double digit yung kanyang drop over the past 2 months. So tama yung kutob naman ni Sir Ronald na minsan pag namamangka ka sa dalawang bangka, ang mangyayari sa iyo is mamamangka ka sa lupa, 'di ba? So that's quite a huge drop, right? And then if you look at also kay Manny Pacquiao, I don't know, for some reason ang laki din ng drop ng numbers ni Manny Pacquiao eh. Actually, even more yung drop ng numbers ni Manny Pacquiao. I'm sure there's an explanation for that. Si Willie Revillame was almost at 50% in January of this year. Ngayon, under 30% na siya. Again, I think the case of Willie Revillame is self-explanatory. I think, so, kanina in-explain ko sa inyo, napakaganda yung response ni Heidi Mendoza. Siya pa nag-sorry nung winidraw ng support sa kanya, yung kinakancel siya. Siya pang nagsabi na bukas siya sa dialogo, pero at the same time, nanindigan siya at ni-remind niya yung tao what she's really standing for and what is the final goal and final vision and what everyone has in common. Ito naman tong tao na to, baliktad. Every month, kaysa magbigay ng detalye ukol sa kanyang mga polisiya, kaysa every month, magbigay ng update sa kanyang pag-aaral ng ano bang talagang trabaho ng senador na hindi lang magbibigay ng jacket at mag-hep-hep huray. Wala, parang siya pang galit. Diba? Siya pang galit. Katulad ng pinag-usapan natin kahapon, parang basically ang argument niya, bakit? Gusto yung artista eh. Pag nandun kami sa event, tuwan-tuwa kayo. So, pag gusto namin ng public service, ba't kayo galit? Well, because competence pong hinahanap eh. At yung sinasabi niya na, hindi naman ako corrupt, that's not enough to qualify you, right? It's like applying for a job and saying, why should I hire you? Kasi hindi po ako magnanakaw sa kumpanya. I'm not gonna hire you because you're not gonna see. I'm gonna hire you because you're competent for the job. Period. Right? Now, ibang usapan na if you do something wrong, there'll be consequences for that. So I think people tend to forget na ang hanap ng tao dito is also competence. Right? Now, as I said, naintindihan ko rin saan galing si Kuya dahil nakalusot yung mga Robin Hood Padilla and Lito Lapid and the whole, alam mo na, di ba? But my point is, at some point, dapat di ka rin magalit if people have, gusto nila, hindi lang puro artista lang andyan sa Senado or purong trapo lang, right? Minsan pwede rin trapo nga, artista na nga, naging trapo pa. Hindi ko na papangalan sino. Pero tama naman si Willie na hindi siya trapo, in fairness, because never siya in politics. But the problem here is that ano bang competence niya, 'di ba? And I think yung the way he responded to critics, yung tipong parang siya pa yung galit. O ikaw, hindi, ikaw tanungin ko, anong gusto mo? Yung ganun. I think that didn't help. And that's why ngayon actually medyo alanganin si Willie, at least in some of the surveys you were seeing. Na there has been a double-digit drop dun sa kanyang numbers. In fact, Willie's numbers now is basically tied with Pacquiao, with Ben Orabalos, Bam Aquino, Kiko, Tolentino, and Imee Marcos. So essentially, these 6, 7, 8 persons. And by the way, Camille Villar is also not doing very well. Camille went, although it looks like she still has a good chance, alam naman natin. Medyo unlimited yata natin dyan. Si Kras. Ingat po kayo sa biyahe. Thank you. Ayan. So basically, it's around 6 or 7 people fighting over the last 1 or 2 slots, which is exactly what I and Sir Ronald have been talking about for the past 2-3 months. Talagang madugo to, guys. But this is very interesting. So, you have basically 6-7 candidates, right, who are separated by few 100,000 votes. So, you can have a situation whereby a few barangays, big barangays or so, could decide who will enter the Senate. But alam natin, guys, hindi lang itong usapan ng Senado eh. It's also a question of, will there be enough votes? Actually, if not even that, will there be enough senators to first of all get rid of Jesus Cordero and put someone more competent there? Uh, Based on all the surveys I'm saying, ang lakas ng chance ni Tito Soto na bumalik. And more than that, I think if Tito Soto is top 5, easily I can see Tito Soto coming back as a Senate President. And for everything we can talk about Tito Soto, Itbulaga, and everything, okay, and the rest, I think he'll be way more competent than Jesus Cordero in terms of Senate presidency. So I think, well, we all know that ang issue dito is hindi lang yung composition ng Senado. Alam din natin ang issue dito is whether the composition of Senate will be even open to properly operationalizing yung concept ng forthwith. Dahil anong petsa na guys? April na. Yung forthwith po ay hindi pa rin nangyayari. Alright? So, let's just wait for the next Senate President because I doubt not only I doubt. Let's wait for the next Senate President, but more important, let's wait for the next Senate to do its job, which is forthwith. Deal with the impeachment. Sara is technically already impeached. So, impeached na po siya. Ang tanong ngayon is, will she be convicted in a trial in the Senate? And that's why napakamahalaga, guys, who makes it to the next Senate, right? Because clearly, if you have Bongo, you have Bato, you have Imee, honestly, even Camille, I doubt these people will vote against Sara Duterte. But there are a couple of other candidates there that I won't be surprised that if they see the evidence and they see the preponderance of evidence, the whole Miggy Mango, the whole Piatos, Mary Grace, may Caleb, may by the way, narinig ko na may nagchismis sa akin na mas maraming mga pangalan na lalabas doon sa confidential fund queen natin, 'di ba? So, I won't be surprised some of these other candidates like Manny Pacquiao, like Benhur Abalos, like Abby Binay, maybe even Cayetana, I would say, right? Or definitely Lacson and mga others. I think these people will be open to not only hold the trial, but also go all the way and convict the vice president if indeed there's a preponderance of evidence. And remember, pagdating sa Senado, yung quantum of evidence na required for conviction is lower than the usual quantum or threshold of evidence required in a normal court, right? So, that's why guys, mahalaga talaga who will become the next senador, or rather, who will be part of the next Senate dito sa mga kandidato na meron tayo. So, what I'm saying here guys is basically this. Unang-una, let's avoid all of this nonsense cancel culture in as much as let's also try to avoid this halo effect of voting for one candidate kahit napaka horrible person, very incompetent, convicted, pero dahil lang he said one thing right, then you're gonna vote for that person, they're great as ever. Yun, false positive, avoid natin yan. Yung single issue voting style. But let's also avoid yung cancel culture. And then, importantly guys, pag-usapan din natin yan. Strategic voting. I think we have to very honestly talk about strategic voting. Strategic voting in terms of, of course, you want Heidi Mendoza, you want Kiko, you want Bam, all of these good people, or Team Liwanag people to make it to the next Senate. But you also want to make sure that yung Team Kadiliman will have as few people as possible, or kasamaan ba? Hindi, liwanag sa dilim. Ito pala may liwanag sa dilim. Kasamaan pala. You wanna make sure na as few as possible as members team kasamaan make it to the next Senate. And at the same time, you wanna make sure that even if hindi ideal, in fact, far from ideal, pero kung bukas naman sa tamang trial at potentially bukas to even holding a high-level official accountable, then maybe you should also vote for them. Yun ang tinatawag na strategic voting. Now, you don't want to believe me? Look at the case, for instance, of the late, for me, he's a martyr. If you look at Alexei Navalny, right, in the case of Russia, one reason why he was extremely successful against Putin's party before, the whole war on Ukraine happened and before he was poisoned and almost killed and all of that, was that he was a big advocate of strategic voting. So in certain provinces in Russia, by the way, Russia is a completely different case because it's not a democracy at all at sobrang hirap. But nevertheless, he was able to score many electoral successes across Russia because what he would do is this. He would always support whoever is the most competitive candidate against the worst candidate, which was from the party of Putin. So let's say if in I don't know, in Oblast region, let's say for instance, the communists were the best bet to beat, I don't know, Putin's candidate, they will support the Communist Party even if they don't like the Communist Party. And then let's say in certain Siberian region, when yung progressives or social democrats had a good chance to win, then he will support the social democrats. And then by strategically supporting always the best rival to the team kasamaan, meaning yung party ni Putin, he was able to score many successes in regional elections in Russia. In fact, he scored so much success that he was almost poisoned, and he was poisoned and almost killed. In fact, he was poisoned, right, with lab level, I mean, the talagang just nerve agent, whatever. He was poisoned during one of his campaign strategic interventions in Siberia, where he was pushing for a candidate who had a very good chance of beating Putin's candidate in that Siberian region. So this concept of no, it's not even democracy. It's called electoral autocracy, right? Meaning you have elections, but it's still basically one man calling the shots, right? So even in an electoral autocracy, you had Alexei Navalny, for me a martyr. I love the guy. He's amazing. And I mean, I'm so inspired by that guy. Alexei Navalny employing so successfully atong strategic voting. So instead of playing this pure effect na pathetic na whatever, dilawan sa whatever. No, he went for strategic vote and he was able to beat the hell out of the government side. So in so many local elections, natalo yung party ni Putin because ang gagawin ni Alexei Navalny is he will mobilize his base behind whoever is the best to beat the candidate of Putin in every single district and region of Russia. And he was so successful in that eventually the government, people close to Putin felt they have to take him down, right? That's how successful he was, right? So I really suggest you guys check the story of Alexei Navalny's electoral strategy because he really proved that strategic voting can be transformational. Now, of course, again, thankfully we're not electoral electoral autocracy. We're actually electoral democracy, but a very flawed democracy, of course. Yes, of course, parliamentary yung system doon dito present. But for me, the idea of strategic voting in principle makes sense. Especially it makes sense when the playing field is so unfair and when kasamaan and kadiliman are so much stronger than liwanag. So the Liwanag, in this case, Alexei Navalny's team, were very successful and were able to punch well above their weight because they were smart enough to distinguish between, hindi ko mas masabing lesser evil to distinguish between who is the real team kasamaan. And then essentially do strategic alliances with everyone else. And then when that other person won, they would do coalition politics and make sure that person doesn't support the worst policies of Kremlin, etc., etc. Do you get what I'm saying, guys? Right? So this whole intervention I'm making here is really about political literacy and political maturity, right? Because if you are just going to be in silos, pa-cute, pa-pure, mga ganon, type 1 error, type 2 error, halo effect, single issue voting, cancel culture, good luck sa atin. Walang mangyayari sa atin. Walang mangyayari sa atin. Now, having said that, you are more than welcome to disagree with me. Go ahead, write your essays, columns, books, whatever. Go ahead, criticize me. I have no problem with that, right? But I just want you guys to consider ito yung mga pinag-usapan natin dito, which is the value of strategic voting. And believe me, mahirap talaga siya. Not only mahirap siya ethically and morally speaking, because I know a lot of us want to feel pure, so we just want to vote for the candidates that we feel 100% comfortable with. But it's also mathematically difficult. So for instance, sila Navalny, they had even analytics. So they would do an analytics and say, okay, ito yung mga permutations ng pwede natin gawin ng coalitions, and ito yung second candidate, itong third. And if this is the algorithm, if this is the combination we get, this is the best chance we have. So it was very analytics driven, probabilistically driven, and strategically driven. So very modern science based yung approach nila Alexei Navalny. in a completely impossible condition, which is Putin's Russia, right? Now, obviously, that approach had its limits because Russia went overboard, basically, after invasion of Ukraine. But the fact that Alexei Navalny was able to score so much success under 10 times more difficult condition than ours means that maybe there's something we can learn from him. Kaya kanina, as I said, in-interview natin si Dina De Leon, let me just say, aside from the fact that we're gonna start giving away at least once a week sana a free jacket or with autograph and all dun sa mga exclusively for the members of YouTube, people who bother to at least be part of our YouTube community even at the price of a single Nespresso. The other thing we're also starting, God willing, inshallah, is also open our own foundation, a non-profit foundation pushing for civic education, for human rights mainstreaming, and also for essentially critical thinking, political critical thinking, right? So meron din kami mga announcement na gagawin dyan. So nothing is final until it's final. So I won't say more until God willing is final. But let me say that we are doing our part, and I'm so glad. I feel so privileged that meron tayong mga kaibigan katulad ni Attorney Dino De Leon, among others, right? Na nangiwala dito sa ating atikain, which is the best way to save our democracy is to elevate the level of political discourse so that we can elevate the maturity of our voting behavior. All of us, we have to elevate it. And then hopefully one day we can get not one, not two, we can get 20, 30 different Vico Sotos all around the country, right? We don't get one or two Kiko or Bang, we get a Senate full of Rizon Teveros types of senators, right? We don't get one or two mayors like, mayoral candidate like Trillanes. No, we'll get 10 different mayors like that in the entire Luzon and beyond. Do you get what I'm saying? So this is the context of our conversations. And as I said, this is a dialogue. And just like Ma'am Heidi Mendoza, I'll say, I understand if sometimes you don't agree with me. Maybe you don't agree with me because you don't know enough. Or you don't agree with me because you don't see where I'm coming from. Maybe you don't agree with me because di mo lang feel. Okay lang yan. But let's continue this dialogue. And let's continue to uplift our country together. So maraming salamat again for everyone who has joined our little community on YouTube. And God willing, we'll give you more updates about our foundation, our little movement, our efforts to really elevate yung diskurso ukol sa politika sa bansa natin, hindi marites, pero talagang kilusan para sa tunay na pagbabago. And good change, real good change, hindi yung tatay style change, real good change. Alright, so guys, change is coming, good change is coming. Hindi na ito scamming. Wala nang scamming. Change is coming, not scam is coming. Tapos na yung scam. Scam is going, good change is coming. Yun po. And on that note, thank you very much. Maraming salamat. And please, go ahead and research. Whenever you watch me, don't be satisfied with what I say here. Because there's just so much I can say in 30, 40 minutes. These things are like taught whole lecture series, right? So go ahead and read about it. Read about strategic voting. You don't believe me? Go and read about Alexei Navalny's strategy and why it works. Go and compare to other countries. Go check Latin America. Check other progressive countries. How their team Liwanag beats Team Kadiliman and Kasamaan against all odds by thinking strategically, right? By not falling for cancel culture, right? By not pa-cute and pa-purist and all. And by following analytics, data, and modern political science and social science analysis. Yun pong kailangan natin. So on that note, thank you very much. God bless, and